Hope you'll be a part of that. I think you'll find it'll be a great time. We're glad that you're here today. Good morning. Hey, I need you to do something that happened to me the other day when I was driving and, trying to get my kids to school. And a bunch of cars were parked over here. A car was coming this way. So one of us had to pull over here to wait for this car to go by. And then as we passed each other, we just kind of did this. Okay, so I just need you to look at somebody around you. I'm not going to ask you to introduce yourself, shake your hands, do a dance or anything like that. Just look around. Just kind of do this. That can mean whatever you want. That could mean your socks are nice today. That could mean really glad that you're here. I acknowledge your presence beside me. I'm really glad that you guys are here today, and it's good to be in the house of God with people and worshiping one another. Or not worshiping one another, don't do that. That's not what you were doing. Worshiping the Lord with one another. Let's try it that way. I think God would appreciate that, and so would your neighbor. All right. So I was telling first service, I've got a small tribe of children in my house, and so this past weekend, if I fall asleep when I'm preaching up here, please forgive me. But it's a busy weekend. I'm starting Friday night. My oldest son is in the band at the high school, and so Friday night football here in Texas, and he's out there playing his instrument and everything, and it's really cool to be a part of. And I'm one of the pit dads. All right, so I'll sign autographs later, if you're interested in that. So I'm just the dumpy guy over there pulling this thing over there for all the kids to stand on, okay? So that's my job. And my job is to get this stand out there for one of the drum majors to clear across the other side of the field, okay? But the drum major's job is very important if you know much about band. I don't, but I've been learning this, okay? And so you got somebody that just stands up out there in front of the whole band, up above everybody else. Everybody can see it has white gloves on, maybe some kind of plumage at the top. I don't. So and they're directing so everybody can see. And that one person is so important that they can be seen and they can be noticed. And my job as a pit dad is to get that thing out there for that person to stand up on. Power of one. It's a big deal. Just that one person standing out there telling people, hey, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going today. The power of one, it's a big deal. The next morning, I had to wake up at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. Actually, earlier than that, because one of my sons had a basketball game, 2 basketball games, mind you, at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the first team didn't even show up. I was like, are you kidding me? Come on. Come on. I got up early to make scrambled eggs and bacon and all that for my kid, And so anyways, but somewhere along the line, the power of one kind of broke down, and the coach might have forgotten to tell the other team, hey, we're playing this week, by the way. So the power of one, it's a big deal on that basketball court with those kids and the angry parents in the stands that are there. Power of one, it's a big deal. Later on that afternoon, I went to my daughter's choir concert. And okay, it sounds like I'm bragging on my child. I am, but I'm not. I need you to know there's a lot of talented kids that go here to Valley View, okay? And there's one of the girls that was in this honor choir, was in first service. And man, there's some great kids around here, okay? But I was at this concert, and Power of One was just I was reminded of that by one of the directors. And, typically the choir concert, it's exciting, I guess. So, they're dressed, the director, they're dressed in black because they're trying not to be noticed. They kind of sneak up there and do their thing, and they sneak over to the side and, have everybody clap for the kids. And this director, though, man, he was on, and he was great. He was on fire. He directed those middle school boys, by the way, who sounded fantastic, by the way. But he directed them, and then he turned around, he got us, the audience, involved as well. And we sang this little line, It was really cool. It just reminded me of the power of this one guy. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do something a little different with this, okay? I'm going to take this to another level. And it was great. It was fantastic. After that, I went to a theater production for one of my other children, and it was great. And it was a Mary Poppins, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful. But the 2 weeks leading up to that, everybody was they're dropping like flies from the stomach bug. So like for 2 weeks, this cast member is out, this cast member is out, this cast member is out. Oh gosh, we don't want, these characters to be out because it's going to mess up the whole show, because one person can change the trajectory of a lot of things, right? The power of one, it's a big deal. Fortunately, everybody was well, as far as I know. Right, they're all good. Yeah, okay. So everybody was good. The show went on. It was amazing. It was fantastic. But the power of one person is a big deal. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about some leadership lessons from Elijah. And just by way of a review from last week, we encourage you to go listen to that online. Joe did a great job of setting up this guy, Elijah. And he comes at this point in time in the nation of Israel's history. Which, by the way, don't forget, the nation of Israel, they're to represent God to the world. God chose this group of people because of the faith of Abraham. This group of people is going to represent him to the whole world. And so over time, though, these people, of Israel just decided, you know what? We think we got it. We got it, God. We don't need you. We've got our own way figured out. We're going to do our own thing. And so by the time that Elijah comes on the scene, there's been several kings. I think it's about 7 kings. I can't remember exactly for sure. There's about 7 kings or so. And each of them turned their backs on God and what God called them to do. And so there's this spiraling down and down and down of the moral compass of that nation. It just gets bad until Elijah pops on the scene. And literally, it just seems like when we talked about it last week, he just kind of shows up. And he goes before King Ahab, who was a mess. I'll read some things about him here in just a minute. He goes before him, and basically Elijah says, you need to know this. It's not going to rain here until I tell you otherwise. See ya. And then he leaves. And then he goes, and he's kind of in hiding, and the ravens go and feed him, take care of him. And it's some amazing things. Again, listen to the sermon last week. It's fantastic. And so here we are today. So we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 18. And I need you to know that backdrop, because there's this crazy culture that this one guy, Elijah, is in. And God plops him down in the history of Israel and said, I need you to lead here. Everybody leads. You may not feel like it. Everybody leads somebody. Everybody leads somebody. And so Elijah comes onto the scene, and God calls him back out again and says, I need you to talk to Ahab again. And so in the book of 1 Kings chapter 18, there's this guy. I'm just going to kind of briefly just explain this. There's this guy named Obadiah. So he's a guy who works for King Ahab, the king at the time, who's just a mess. And Obadiah is working for the king. And Obadiah, though, he loves God. He sees this is a problem with the king. In the midst of this pagan situation, he's working in government, trying to do what's right, trying to do the best thing that he can. And the Queen Jezebel at the time, is every bit, probably even worse than her husband Ahab. And she's like, you know what? Where I come from, we worship these gods. I don't want the God of Israel around here. I don't want his prophets around here. So she systematically goes to work to try to get rid of God's people, basically, so they can worship this other religion. We'll get to that here in just a moment. So here, enter the scene right here of 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 16. Obadiah's out with the king. They kind of go out because they're trying to find some food and stuff so that the animals and the people don't starve. Obadiah's going this way, king is going that way. Obadiah runs into Elijah, who they haven't seen for a long period of time. And so here's this, verse 16. So Obadiah goes to meet King Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Obadiah went back to tell Ahab, hey, Elijah wants to see you. Remember that guy who said it's not going to rain and it hasn't been raining? That guy's here. He wants to see you, king. Obadiah was a little afraid to tell the king that, but everything worked out. So Elijah's kind of waiting for the king. Verse 17. This is King Ahab. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you troubler of Israel? I mean, he's got to be mad. This is his people. They don't have any rain or dew for the last 3 years. That's a rough situation. And he calls out Elijah, this prophet who God has called up, who's raised up to confront him 3 years prior and said, hey, it's not going to rain. You guys are a mess. And so Elijah says back to him in verse 18, I've not made trouble for Israel. Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You've abandoned the Lord's commands and you've followed the Baals. So Elijah says, listen, hey, don't blame it on me. I'm trying to be the one who's standing up for what God's called me to do. I'm putting that message to you to hear it. You're the one. Your sin and the sins of your fathers have caused us problems. Leadership lesson number one. Leadership lesson number one, and it comes from Ahab, is this. My sin affects more than just me. Now, my sin isn't just this private matter that I got to just, take care of. But my sin, it has tentacles. And it goes out and it causes problems. Because King Ahab and because his dad and his dad before him said, I don't need you, God. I got my own thing going on. Because of that, the people are now in a drought and are having a hard time keeping their livestock alive because of King Ahab's sin. Be warned, church. That our sin has a way of resurrecting itself if we're not careful, okay? My sin affects more than just me. We're going to keep on reading here. Verse 19. So this is Elijah still talking. Now, summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Just, again, a little background to know what's going on here. Elijah's saying like, hey, king, here's what we're going to do. You're the problem. You're the one that caused all this mess here. You guys are worshiping these other gods here. Let's have a little contest, okay? And Elijah's like, I'm not going to let this go. He just says, like, bring your people and come on, okay? So 450, 400. All right, so it's about 850 to 1. It just takes one. Just takes one, 850 to 1. So let's talk about this Baal God, okay? Remember, the nation of Israel is supposed to be holy and represent God to the rest of the world. Around them are people, maybe nice people, maybe kind of some neighbors, are kind of nice. And they're worshiping this Baal and Ashtoreth, or Asherah is pronounced different ways. And they're worshiping that. They seem like decent kind of people, I guess. I don't know. And so Israel's kind of watching that, and they're like, maybe we need to be a part of that. Maybe we need to do this too. So this god Baal, lowercase g, God, is part of the Phoenician. That's like the west coast of Israel, the coast of Israel, kind of towards the north, where we're at here. And this is a god of fertility, rain, and dew. What's not happened in the last couple of years? Rain, dew, okay? It's just kind of like, take that, Baal. Okay, that's who they worshipped. He was often called, not only called Baal, but he's called Prince, Lord of the earth, he who rides on the clouds, the Lord of the heavens. Here's what I need you to know. And Ashtoreth, that was Baal's wife, basically, okay, in the little lowercase g God world. Okay, here's what I need you to know, because I understand this. Here we are in modern America, and you read that, and you're like, we don't do that. Gosh, those silly people, they used to worship gods and everything. We don't do that in America today. Oh, don't fool yourself. The reason why they're worshiping these gods is because they're bored and need something to do with their time. Or they're tired of their kids, so they're going to sacrifice their child to these gods. And the reason why is this. They believe that if I worship the right way and do all these things, that God's going to bless me. That I'm going to have whatever I need. I'm going to have the lands that's going to produce a lot of grain and everything, which equals money. My wife is going to be, woohoo, okay, all right? I'm going to have all the sex that I want. It's going to be great if we do just this one thing. And honestly, it becomes less an altar of Baal and Asherah, and it becomes an altar of me and making me happy and me being comfortable and happy and satisfied and at peace. It's not just ancient Canaan that had the problems, church. We got that thing today. Yeah, you may not be sacrificing kids in the fire and having prostitution worship going on to help worship these people, but we have this altar that we've erected about me and my life and my happiness, and don't you tread on that. So let me read to you from 1 Kings chapter 16 about these people here. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, that's the king right now, son of Omri, he becomes king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. Now, he's setting records in craziness. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, like the first king in that order, he just started a mess, but he also married this lady named Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. I mean, he marries this woman whose dad's name has the name of the god in it. It's a pretty messy situation. And he began to serve Baal and worship him. He sets up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. He is erecting gods and idols, altars to worship for himself, is what he's doing. So after marrying Ahab, Jezebel, this woman, she now sits on the throne of Israel as a queen. And one of the first things that she tries to do is she's trying to wipe out all of Israel's worship of that one true God. And now she's trying to destroy the mouthpieces of God, the prophets. And here's lesson number 2 that I want you to know is this. Elijah is an underdog right now. He's got all these prophets line up against him, and there's this one man. And here's the mathematical lesson that we need to know as we follow Jesus, is this: me plus God equals the majority. Me plus God equals the majority. You might feel like you're the only one at your school trying to live right and do what's right. You plus God equals the majority. The same thing in your business and in your work and in your community. You plus God equals the majority. Don't miss out on that fact. God's at work here. God's doing some amazing things here that we're about to see. But God is still at work, even though it looks like we're the underdogs here. God specializes in the underdog work. So he has this competition set up, and I think it's pretty fantastic. Here is this. I'm going to read this starting verse 20. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel, and he assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people, and he said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." Pretty simple explanation here. But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, "I'm the only one of the Lord's prophet left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces, put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I'll prepare the other bull, put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I'll call on the name of the Lord God. And the God who answers by fire, he is God." And then all the people said, they finally speak, "Well, what you say is good. We're going to do this." Okay. So just to clarify, make sure we understand here. Elijah's recognizing that the king's like saying, "Hey, you're the problems." Elijah says, "No, absolutely not. You're the problem, and let's have this contest, okay?" And here's the contest, basically. One is this: both teams, you're going to get a large bull. Each team's going to cut it up into pieces, set it on the wood. They're not going to set fire to it. Then they're going to pray to your God. And whichever one responds with fire, that's the true God. That's the competition that we're getting ready to have. But there's this phrase in there that I find really interesting. As Elijah steps forward and he talks to the people, he says this. He says, "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, follow him." How long will you waver? Literally speaking, in the Hebrew here, that word waver, and it's used a little bit later on, which I'll get to here in a second. The idea here is walking on two crutches. How long are you going to walk on 2 crutches here? It can also be translated, how long are you going to be limping along? How long are you going to be limping along? So Joshua comes before these people who've been worshiping the idol of themselves, basically. And he calls them out and says, "How long are you going to limp along here?" I don't think it was any accident that the scripture talks about this in these terms of limping or hobbling. I don't think it's an accident, because if you try to get your life, your meaning, your worth, your fire from anything but the true God, you're going to be lame all your life. You're going to be lame all your life. The world may call it like this really cool dance. In fact, some of your translations may say they danced around the altar a little bit later on. That same word there is that hobbling effect. The world may call it a dance, but God calls that lame. God calls that limping. And every time and whenever we try to worship at the altar of ourself, we're crippled. We're lame. We're limping along. Even though we may think that we're okay, but we're just limping along at the altar of ourselves. And so these people, Elijah's calling these people out and said, how long are you going to just limp along here? You got to choose. You got to choose this. There's a picture here that you may or may not have seen. I don't know, but I don't know if you know what this thing is. It's in a building south of here, and in the Alamo. And this is the little line that was drawn by Colonel William Travis. And so, we don't know exactly, this is historically accurate 100%, but the legend is that, according to the Texas legend, like in those last days of the battle for Alamo, the mission had been surrounded by the Mexican troops, and defeat was certain at the time. Travis had been told by the enemy commander, you got to surrender or else your entire force is going to be killed. So Travis knows this, and he gets up in front of the men and he takes his sword and he draws this line in the dirt, and he asks the men, you need to choose your fate here. You can go and you can leave the compound, you can surrender and leave this Alamo, or you can cross this line and you can join me in defending this compound to the death and no turning back. There's this line that he had to draw. And the legend goes that basically everybody did except for one person. And you know the rest of the story. They do all die. I mean, there's some women and children and a few other people, but everybody's died defending that. But somewhere along the line, Colonel William Travis realized that, man, I got to call these guys out. We can't just kind of sit here lazily, but there's something that we got to draw this line. Are you in or are you out? And God calls us in the same way. Are you in or are you out? Leadership lesson number 3 is this: God will not accept divided loyalties from us. It's not an option. God doesn't allow us to say, hey, I kind of like God and what he's got going on. Me and Jesus, we're homeboys and everything. I like God. Yeah, we're cool like that. But I kind of also like this over here. So I'm going to add this to my little grocery cart of religious things. God says, that's not how this works. I'm the God of the universe, the creator of all things, and it doesn't work that way. Where are you at with that? Have you crossed that line? Have you said, man, I'm in? Or are you limping around over here at an altar of yourself, worshiping you and your satisfaction and your comfort, which always leads to limping around every time? Verse 21 is kind of a shocking verse here. At the end, he says this, but the people said nothing. I mean, Elijah calls them out. And they just sat there. They just sat there. They didn't talk. They didn't say anything. I don't know if they were just afraid. Maybe they were apathetic. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they're just, the peer pressure is just too strong right there. Maybe they were just spiritually just numb. I mean, they'd heard all these stories about God and Yahweh, all these wonderful things he had done. And maybe they're just kind of numb to that. Like, whatever. And God's like, it's not how this works here. But the people were quiet. This is a problem because the people had been quiet for years as the country just spiraled out of control. And leader after leader just says, we're going to do things our way. We're going to do all these other nations are doing this. We're going to do this thing too, instead of following the one true God. And then here they are. They're starving. And they're in a drought. It's a mess. Because the people said nothing, the country was just in this chaotic mess, and it's a problem. Where is it in your life where you need to not be quiet? You know, you probably heard this quote before. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's from Edmund Burke. I've seen different people say different variations of this, but you might have heard this. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That's easy, right? That's easy, just to sit back and do nothing. And where are you at with that? Where is it in your life that you have got to say something? Leadership lesson number 4. My silence doesn't always bring peace, but can often bring destruction. The nation of Israel had just been quiet. Well, maybe it's just socially, hey, I don't want to create any ripples here, but, I'm trying to get along with everybody, so I'm just not going to say anything. And then they're not saying anything, and they're not saying anything. And then over and over, here we are. We just drifted away into just godlessness, which leads to destruction. Verse 25, then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there's so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but don't light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. That's a long time, right? Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced, is what this translation said. This is that word again. This is that limp hobble thing that we're talking about, literally speaking in Hebrew. They limped, they hobbled, they two-crutched around the altar that they had made. So there's these religious leaders of the altar, of this worshiping of Baal and the altar themselves, and they're limping around this altar, trying to get his attention. And at noon, verse 27, this cracks me up. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. This man of God, confident in who God is, he begins to taunt these prophets. Shout louder, he said. Surely he's a God. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or maybe he's busy. You got to read this in some other translations. It's really kind of fun, okay? Surely he's a God. Maybe he's deep in thought, or he's busy, or he's traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and he must be awakened. So they shouted louder. Here's these prophets of Baal. They shout louder, and they begin to slash themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. There's no response. No one answered. Not a big shocker, right? Not a big shocker. Shouldn't be a big deal for the Lord of heaven, as one of Baal's titles was. Shouldn't have been a big deal for him, right? When we worship at the altar of ourself, it leads to that. Nothing. No answer. It's going to always wind up being nothing from our idol of ourselves. They're limping around the altar that they've made. They're limping. This is exactly what idol worship and the worship of self does to us. We just limp around the junk that we make up. Think that we're okay, but we're not. These things of this world that we often try to seek for our comfort, for our peace, for our pleasure, for our enjoyment, this altar of self, Scripture is very clear that it's here today, but it's gone tomorrow. You may be good looking today, maybe not tomorrow. You may be healthy today, maybe not tomorrow or the next day. Your bank account may be good, maybe not tomorrow or the next day. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. Why would you limp around that altar? Matthew 6, Jesus says this in Matthew 6:19, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy it, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin don't destroy. That's a good investment right there. And where thieves don't break in and steal, for where your treasure is, there your heart's going to be also. But if it's down here on earth and all these things that seem to satisfy right now, you're just limping around. You're just limping around instead of storing it up in heaven. These prophets of Baal, they begin to just shout louder and louder. I mean, maybe what they were doing was not working, so they're going to try other things to get the Baal's attention. We do that too. We say, okay, well, maybe I just need more education. Maybe I just need people to acknowledge that I am something. And so I'm going to keep getting degrees after my name. I'm going to keep doing this. Or I need more money. You know, maybe if I finally have enough money, people are going to just respect me finally. And so over and over again, we keep just limping around this altar. Or maybe it's sex and relationships. And over again, we keep trying to do these things. And here's the thing. When we keep trying to snap out of this mess over here, this unfulfillment, this sitting in a parking lot on a Saturday night by yourself, just hurting and ashamed and mad and angry at everything and we try drugs, or we try sex, or we try relationships and adventure or power or whatever. Every time we try to get out of that, it snaps us right back into it. That's the problem of worshiping at the idol of me. It snaps us right back into that mess. Let me tell you something. The prophets of Baal, they were pretty sincere in what they were doing. I mean, they really believed that, man, if I cut myself, if I bleed, and if I plead before the Baals, they're going to answer me. As my blood rains down on this ground, like there hadn't been a rain, they're going to answer me. They owe it to me to answer me. I got to do something. And as they're bleeding and pleading, they're pretty sincere about their beliefs. But let me tell you, sincere beliefs doesn't make it truthful. You might be sincere in what you believe. God wants me to be happy. The one time I read my Bible this year seemed to indicate that God does. So God wants me to be happy, so therefore I'm going to live this kind of life. Don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. You probably ought to read a little bit more in the Bible. But just because you are sincere in your belief does not make it truthful or right. You know who was sincere in their beliefs? In the 1930s, the 1940s? The Nazis, they were sincere. They believed that certain groups of people weren't really human, weren't worthy to be valued. They were very sincere. They were very sincere in their beliefs. But it led to destruction and horrible atrocities. So just because these people are sincere with some things does not make it right. Bleeding and pleading doesn't do any good. It leads to destruction. Evil always does. Life without God's direction every time leads to destruction. So then it's Elijah's turn. Verse 30. Then Elijah said to all the people, all that mess, after a long period of time, all this craziness, then Elijah just comes on the scene. He said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and then he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name will be Israel. He rebuilds, with the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord. He dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He's just kind of getting them back. Hey, this is who we are as people of God. Remember the 12 tribes, God's promise to us. We're representing God. We're rebuilding this thing. And he digs this trench around his altar. Other guys didn't do that. He's digging this trench, right? He arranged the wood and cut the bull into pieces, laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, hey, go fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering in the wood. I remember, there's not much water around here. This is crazy. Elijah, what are you talking about? Just go do it. Verse 34, do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered. What? What are you doing? Do it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and he prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you're a God in Israel. I'm your servant, and I've done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me. So these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you're turning their hearts back again. Man, if you don't know how to pray, read the prayers in the Bible. Man, get some ideas from here. This is good stuff. Then the fire, verse 38, then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also looked up all the water in the trench. How about that? God's big God. You sang about him earlier. He did some amazing things. He didn't just burn up the bulls on the, he like made this like nuclear hole there, I guess. I don't know. It's this amazing thing. God just kind of, he over delivers a lot. It's pretty impressive. He loves the odds of 850 to 1 because he does some great work in those moments. Verse 39, when all the people saw this, I don't know if it was a lightning bolt. I don't know what it was. I wish I could have been there. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate on the ground and they cried, "The Lord, he's God." The Lord, he's God, right? Pretty amazing thing. Pretty amazing thing. So just review on this a little bit. So Elijah comes out, and the first thing that he does is he repairs the altar of the Lord, the place where they're to worship. He just carefully just kind of picks up the pieces of where they're to worship. Leadership lesson number 5, get your life right with God first. A lot of good things in life, got to make way for the best things in life, which is God. Where in your life do you need to repair your worship to the Lord? Because I think a lot of times we just like worship at the altar of self over here, and then we just kind of forget about God conveniently, or maybe we intentionally, I'm not sure, it just varies for all of us. But sometimes we get in these situations where we're not worshiping the Lord. You know, maybe it's in your life, there's somebody in your life that needs to see you rebuilding this altar to the Lord. So maybe there's some kids in your life or grandkids or coworkers that they need to see you building up this worship. That part of my life is worship of the God of the universe. Maybe your kids or grandkids need to see you on the old Google machine, you know, before you go on vacation. And like, "What are you doing, Mom?" "Well, hey, I'm looking for a church to go worship at because we're going to be gone on a Sunday, and we're going to go worship with God's people. We're going to repair that altar of the Lord that's been broken. I'm going to get my family to church." Going to church doesn't make you like, you know, God looks at you and says, "Okay, bam, you're into heaven now." It's the heart behind it, and it's the fact that you got kids and grandkids and neighbors watching you. You're speaking when you come and don't come. And maybe it's time that you repair that broken altar before God and get yourself here. Get yourself with the people of God. Get in a life group. Get in a rooted group. Do something except limping around the altar of yourself. Might be why you got a drought in your life. Who needs to see you rebuild that? Man, he has them dig a trench. He dumps water on it 3 times. Water was scarce. Sometimes doing the things of God doesn't always make sense. Tithing doesn't always make financial sense. But it's a way for us to say, "God, it's yours. It's yours. I trust you, God." Doesn't make sense, maybe humanly speaking, but it does in God's schemes of thing, and he works in that. Doesn't always make sense to give up a lucrative career to serve in the body of Christ. Doesn't always make sense. But God's got something going on there. Doesn't always make sense to run an ethical business when everybody else over here is doing these kinds of back closed door deals. It just takes one. It just takes one. Verse 36, Elijah steps forward. There's all this mess of people, right? Mess of people just going on, worshiping at the altar of themselves. And then the scripture says that then Elijah, he just steps forward. Where in your life do you need to step out of the mess, out of the limping, hobbling around the altar of yourself? Where in your life do you need to step forward and begin to speak for God and to say something? Because it just takes one. That's leadership lesson number 6. I've been saying this the whole time. It just takes one. It just takes one to start it. It just takes one middle schooler in your cafeteria. It just takes one to stand up and go over to that girl that tripped and spilled all her lunch stuff everywhere. It just takes one to stand up and help her out, to start something. It just takes one. Elijah prays and he seeks God. He acknowledges who God is. He names the odds to God again, as if God didn't know, but I don't know. It's great that he just names out God. Here's the situation again. He reminds God that he's doing this because of God's commands. He pleads for God to answer him. And then listen to this. His purpose in his prayer, when he prays this to God, is so that the people will know that the Lord is God. So that the people will know that the Lord is God and that this Lord is turning the people's hearts back to him. Leadership lesson number 7 is this. My successes don't belong to me, but they belong to God to be used for his purposes. My successes don't belong to me, but they belong to God to be used for his purposes. See, Elijah didn't start this competition because he was like, man, I can't wait to add another trophy to my trophy shelf when I get home about cool things that God did, through me. Look at this, guys. No, that wasn't his method there. It wasn't for him to write a book about his experiences and have other prophets look at what he did. Wow, look at what Elijah did. What was your secret to this? That wasn't Elijah's deal. That wasn't his thing at all. It wasn't for him to like stand in front of the altar at just the right time with his cell phone and get a selfie with a lightning bolt coming back here. Oh, God, look, and post this on the internet. That was not his purpose. That's the altar of me again. His purpose of that success was so that God could be honored and acknowledged and worshiped. If your life is not pointing to God, you got to take stock. You might be limping around an altar of yourself. You got to take stock in this. So let me ask you a question. What's your lightning bolt moment? It may not have been lightning, I don't know. But some people, man, you just kind of, maybe you've just been blinded because you've been limping around this altar for a long time. And maybe you got to have something to just get your attention. Maybe not though. Maybe he's been whispering your name for weeks now. And maybe that's why you're here. You're like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know. I was that guy in the parking lot last night. I'm not sure what my next move was, but for some reason God told me to come here today. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's you. Maybe it didn't have to be a lightning bolt, but maybe it's something that just got your attention. And you're here. And the right response when God comes on the scene is not to Snapchat it, is not to take pictures of it, but it's to fall down and we worship the God of the universe who does amazing things for his name, his glory, not limping around at this silly little altar down here that we make. It's for his name and for his glory. That's the right response. And then immediately after this, Elijah goes out, gets everybody get these prophets, go catch them, grab them, and we're going to kill them. Now, I know you're like, okay, I thought God was nice. I thought God was supposed to, be loving and kind. Well, you know what? Yeah, he is. He's also just. And just like your parent, just like your boss, sometimes you just have it up to here. And I'm done. I'm done with the prostitution that takes place and worshiping all these idols. I'm done with people throwing their kids in the fire to worship Baal. I'm done. I'm done with these prophets leading my people astray, these false prophets leading my people astray. I'm done. And we're going to get rid of the sin in the camp. We're going to get it out of here so that my people can worship. And maybe you're in a drought because you got a lot of sin in your life that you just won't get rid of. Maybe God's calling you to say, kill it. Get it out of here. I don't mean to literally kill people, all right? Don't hear that. But maybe you got influences that you need to step away from. Maybe she's not pulling you in the right direction. Maybe you need to pull away from that. Maybe he's not pulling you in the right direction. Maybe the things you're listening to or watching are exposing yourself to over and over and over and over and over again. Maybe you got to get rid of it. Because I don't have time to get into it, but later in the story here, then the rain comes. God does some amazing things. The people get rid of the mess, and then the rain comes. It didn't come while they're worshiping at the altar themselves, but it came whenever God's name was glorified and honored. So I'm just going to ask you, just as we close out, I just have some questions I want you to consider. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Maybe that's weird. I don't know. But I'm just going to ask you to close your eyes just solely so you can focus. That's it. Okay? I'm not going to do anything weird. I'm just going to ask you to close your eyes because I want you have this moment. You're here today. You have this quiet moment right now for you to think before you get figured out about lunch and all this stuff. Just think. I got some questions for you. And then I'm going to pray for you. I want you to think about where God has placed you right now in your life. Your job, the community that you live in, clubs you're involved in, the teams, your home, your grandkids. Where has God placed you right now? Got that picture in your brain? Now think about this. Where in your life has sin caused problems for you and then others in your life? Like Ahab.